And what we're trying to do is make a shopping list for what are the points of interest for you guys, and then go out and see how we can, what we can get for you, yeah?
There needs to be a much closer involvement between local businesses, local employers and the school system, and really talking about what opportunities, talking to children when they're young. And I don't see what, I think that's the right approach, really, to talk to children when they're very young about what they want to do, to get them thinking about the world of work and how they're going to enter it, so that local employers can have an informed view of what they have to offer, but what local young people are interested in doing. Because I think our experience was that employers are actually quite scared, quite anxious, and schools can be quite, they don't have a great deal of interaction with the external community in which they find themselves.
So linkages between schools and players outside schools.
Yes. In the UK, we used to have a service which has been cut back quite dramatically, which was about education business partnerships, where children at the age of 16 would do 2-week work placement in a local business. But quite often that became a very sort of, it lost its value, because I think it expects a lot of the employer, and it needs to be done properly in order for the young person to get a real benefit or experiencing, getting a taste of what work is like. But certainly our service has been quite drastically cut back. I think the other side of the apprenticeships, from the business perspective, we don't have very many big businesses. We have lots of small businesses. And if a business is worried about surviving 1 year, 2 years, it's a big risk to take on a young person, because it's a big investment for them, and it means it's a long-term commitment which they may not be able to fulfill.
If it's training and education, it's not just about schools and training centres, it's about companies. It's a big part of it. Be it, the people doing plastering, or in Cesena they've got all this IT cluster thing, which kind of trying to bridge the university where they've got this IT department and sort of high-tech startups and that kind of thing. So you're going all across the board in terms of sector and level of sophistication, but you're still this bridging relating between the two. That's a pretty fundamental thing.
The way they are welcome in the company, the way the employer works with the youngsters might have an impact. And I would be interested in when we talk about good practice, in seeing
working with outside, be it you or some other
how
thing.
Do they manage? Why sometimes the job is not that attractive, but because the company is welcoming and takes care of the new ones, they stay and they enjoy it, or they build up an experience. And
so it's about even resources inside.
I think it counts in apprenticeship and all, because they don't look at the potential, they look at the immediate situation, and how even soft skills, you need to look at them as a potential thing to develop. Companies can't hire perfect kids, with a perfect attitude. Their attitude will not be shaped from the minute they start their apprenticeship. It's going to be built up in the company. So how do managers or HR admit that, and how do they fill the gap? And
of course, companies often answer that their role is not to teach all this. Their role might be to train employees, but someone who just doesn't know how to speak to an adult person, is that really the role of the company? That should have been addressed earlier.
Yeah, there's
I think
because they're not social workers.
Because we were talking recently with Barclays Bank, big name, you've all heard of Barclays Bank, and they were looking at the profile of their employees, and they had hardly anybody under 25, and they thought, well, want young people to open bank accounts so that we can, get money off them. But we want them to open bank accounts, so we need to ensure that we have young people in our workforce in order to understand what their needs are from their bank, which is going to be different from somebody in their 50s. So there is an incentive partly through their corporate social responsibility arm, but also from a business base, that it actually will help them to have young people on their workforce. But it's also good for getting their senior managers and their staff to work, paired up with a young person to say, you can't go to a meeting dressed like that, and you can't talk to him in that way. Those sorts of key skills which we've just talked about.
So they organize training for the businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, to telling them, listen, this is what you think of. You should think of what you need, what kind of profiles within 10, 20 years. How can we help, etc. So I think we can also think of doing some kind of awareness raising or work with companies, not just with the young people in education.
And finding how these outreach things are done.
And then connect.
One thing this guy said is what they did with the employment agencies. I don't know if it connects exactly with this, but they divided the staff. The staff that dealt with the job seekers were different people from those who went to the companies to pitch to them, because they're two different discourses.
I think that's exactly the sort of thing. I'd be quite happy to try and get one of our businesses to come along to talk about some of the work they've been doing with long-term unemployed people to get them back into work. And they've got basically been taking groups of 10 young people, unemployed people at a time, training them and trying to place them into jobs, and they've got a success rate of about 67%. So
it's quite often seen as not as good as the academic route.
This is one of the major things that came up when I was doing all the visits time and time again, very different context, but the issue of attractiveness of vocational and technical education. Even in Germany, because people talk outside a lot now, but the trend in Germany is for less and people to want to participate in such education. You have to communicate it better, but also actually improve it where it's not good.
Also, you have to make that argument with the parents as well. Parents and
yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Because the parents and the family are very strong influences of what choice that young person makes.
That is a different problem that connected with what the young people and their parents want for their children, for themselves. People prefer to be a doctor than to be, or psychologist than to be a worker, and this has some kind of mind, no problem, some kind of.
Sometimes they think they prefer. One thing also about the parents is they've got that issue too, where people get these messages from the parents. It's a big thing in Kaiserslautern because they're in transition from an economic model. But a lot of these young people, they've got their parents who work in these jobs, which are on the way out. But they're not really aware of it the way someone who studies this kind of thing is aware of it. So tell them, just do this and you'll be fine. Of course they won't, because the parents are wrong. But people repeat, what's worked for me so far, but things are in shit. In Suzanne, the lead partner, it's a fundamental problem. They've got all these unemployed young people with degrees and things, and then lots of job vacancies that they can't fill. Usually because they want something of a more technical nature.
Too many people finish the studies. In our case, it is two universities, one is technical and the other is a classical university. And in this classical university there are mainly the studies within the teaching, yes. So you can be a teacher of geography, of Polish, and English, you can be a pedagogist, and that's...
But do they get those jobs?
How many teachers can work at schools? Yes.
Yeah.
They finish this kind of studies, and then they can't find work, and they won't find work. Right?
So that would be also adapting university, because I don't want to give the impression that we're talking just about getting people to do vocational. It's all levels of education. This can also, like in Avilés, it's an important thing to do. Getting university to be a better transition to working life.
It's also a problem what we have in Germany
is that we have not enough persons or young people who go to the handcraft and these jobs that are not very attractive for them. They wanted to work in. And so we have on the one hand the skilled worker shortage and these not attractive jobs due to the salary, or it's a hard job, or you have to work at night, all these things at the weekend. And on the other hand, we have a lot of persons who are very qualified on the one hand, but not able to work in their life later because there's a mismatch between the studies and the labor market demands.
We have a situation where we have over-formed people in university, classical university in Cesena, and there are many years that our companies say that we need more professional workers, more people specialized in technical works or in high technology works. We have some classical university, many psychologists, many people who have some kind of formation and laurea degrees that not fit well with the market. But it's a problem even for what will be the market in the future, because our territory is shifting from what it was 5 years ago, and we still don't know how it will be the future. Our company, we made some interviews with our association companies, and we asked them what do you think you will need in the future. They don't know what they need, what will be the main profiles, what possibly will be the successful fields of action of the companies. And this is a problem, because if you don't know what will be your future, it's difficult to have your formation. There is many istituti di formazione, I don't know, training institutes that do many different types of formation, even specific technical operator. But the problem is that even that we don't know, and we did not succeed in fitting all the profiles.
What about dual education, apprenticeships? This is the obvious thing one thinks of Germany, these days.
We've been working very hard to encourage the take-up of apprenticeships.
They have got, in Germany, systems of dual education for the service sector, which might be more of and that might be interesting to find more about.
In REN, we would like to develop apprenticeship for service sector, indeed, like business and graduate university apprenticeship, because it exists and it's not developed enough. We focused a lot on industry or art or construction building apprenticeship.
Yeah.
But through JobTown, we would like to do more of a service apprenticeship.
Okay, so that's a stuff. I mean, I think in Thurrock you've got a pretty clear example of that, because you have this port, right? And then the problems with the locals thinking it was a kind of physically dirty kind of like on the waterfront type port. At the same time, they need to train them. That one thing you were describing where they began £18,000 a year for the apprentice when they were doing the training. I mean, that sounds for a lot of people that would be a very good. And then would they get what, 35 when they finish?
Yeah, do a 4-year apprenticeship and get 35. They immediately go up to 35,000 pounds a year when they're qualified.
And they're making, what was it, 17, 18 a year while they're doing the apprenticeship?
When they're going on day one, yeah, they're at £17,000 per year just to go to college for the first year. Second year, they start doing 2 days a week. Actually, in the workplace and 3 days in the college. And gradually, they shift so that they're spending more time in the workplace and less time in college. But it's a 4-year apprenticeship.
Yeah, but that sounds like something a lot of people, could do worse. Yeah.
Who pays that?
Sorry?
Who pays it?
It's the Port of Tilbury that they actually employ the apprentices. They recognise that they need to invest in young people to make sure that they've got the skills. the need in the future. So,
see, of course, the thing you have there, something like a port, it's a long-term infrastructural way of thinking, which is great, but it's different, like what Anna was saying, for local businesses which have a much shorter horizon of planning. You know? In a port, you see what I mean? It's like a mine or something where you're talking about 10, 20, 30-year projections.
Yeah, but I think some of the issues, one of the biggest issues with the English apprenticeship system is it's quite bureaucratic. And that puts a lot of businesses off the system. And one of the things that we aspire to do, and I know that people have done this thing, actually, Anna's done this in Enfield, is to set up an organisation that actually employs the apprentices. So for example, it might employ 300 apprentices, and then it loans them to the companies when they need them. So if you need an apprentice for 3 months, you do 3 months of your apprenticeship with that company and then move on to somebody else. But we do all the bureaucracy and the paperwork. I do think there's an element of certain British companies seeing apprentices as, in some instances, cheap labour, and the minimum wage for an apprentice, bear in mind the Portland we pay £17,000 a year. The minimum wage for an apprentice is £2.95 per hour, which is about £5,000 a year. So it's not attractive to many young people to do apprenticeships.
This is one of the key issues of apprenticeship, is quality of apprenticeship, and is it a real path to something? And then quality control, and that's an important part of it. You know?
I mean, the apprenticeships have to be through an approved framework, so I don't think there's an issue about the quality of the apprenticeship. I think they will still get the same framework, they'll still go through the same framework, you come out with the same qualification. Our frameworks, so you pick the framework off the shelf from a training provider, and they're quite set, and they don't always meet business needs. So if I'm a logistics operator, for instance, I might want somebody to do some forklift truck training, I might want them to do some straddle carrier training, and I might want them to do some work on warehousing. Well, actually, you can only do one of those apprenticeships. You can't pick and mix between the different frameworks at the moment. And I think one of the things we aspire to do again is to develop that pick and mix approach to apprenticeship frameworks. But there's an issue nationally.
Is it set nationally, these different frameworks?
They're set by the Sector Skills Council, as I understand.
You have sector skills council in the UK, not all countries have. You are one of the few who has in Finland.
So and the idea is that business influences the Sector Skills Councils to develop the training and the apprenticeships frameworks that we need.
But the dual studies that are familiar in your countries or not?
No. What do you go dual study, a mixture between school and company?
Yeah.
Not school and company on a higher high qualified. That means that you go to the university for 1 semester and then you go back to the retailer and work for them.
This exchange of information. See, they don't just get a position to practice. The companies are giving them input into the educational structures and how to do it, and vice versa. It's a triangle between government, which is sort of Big Daddy oversees the whole thing, private sector, and education and training providers, and they're all hooked up. It's not just getting them a training thing they can do out of work.
Currently is the model that all people in Spain want to cover the US system. Everybody talks about the German.
Yeah. Portugal, Spain, Italy, they're all importing a dual system and apprentice systems now from Germany. Also Denmark is helping Spain with some of these implantation schemes, because they used to have apprenticeships in the 70s and then they disappeared as a practice, and now they're trying to bring them back, and they have to get up to speed with making these things work. So I think the obvious interest from the southern countries is this, and not so southern. I mean in the UK in the 50s into the 70s they had like industrial trade schools that were quite serious, and they were dismantled. And now there's a lot of people saying, well, this was a mistake. And there's a swing back that's very generalized. Well, the other thing we have to look at is problematizing the German. But how exportable is the German model? Which are the aspects which might be of a transferable nature? Which are more specific to very particular circumstances? How flexible is it? Does it have to be industry? Is it service sector? Is it like, what are the limits? I guess this is as useful as perhaps knowing why it is that it works well. Like, so what kind of circumstances can you do it in? Like young people, do you need, what kind of young people are suitable for it? Let's say if we're talking about sort of at-risk young people, are they really able to do that? I think problematizing it also raises the bar for the discussion, particularly if you're talking about applying something. What the do's and don'ts and the limitations are as interesting as the possibilities.
The information flow, it's very difficult in Germany. They now famous jobs like the hairdresser or whatever, but they are not, they have not the information about the various jobs they are available.
It's the same in England. The careers services it's very patchy in some places, it's very good in other places, it's rubbish.
Their understanding of what that would be like is often not as good as it could be. That's also the connection with the world of work. Like when I was in Cyprus, it was the same story. Like young people sort of almost, they might as well just be sort of throwing a dark line like at it because they have very little idea of what these jobs are like. So, or maybe they watch a TV program. So
attractiveness and prevent drop-off is one of our concerns.
Drop out, like the dropouts.
Drop out of apprenticeship.
Is that a problem because they don't finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because they haven't chosen properly. Because they've chosen apprenticeship because they can't go to the good school. It's not a positive choice. It's a choice, as we say, by default. That's why we need to work on the attractiveness as well, and more information while they are at school about what it's going to be.
It's obviously the need to have very good quality career guidance in schools, which is also aware of what's available locally. And the career guidance needs to be mindful of new career options, new things coming on stream locally.
How many of us would know, how many of us knew when we were 16 what we wanted to do in future? Yes, you go to college and do something, you might not make the right decision and you might need to go back and do something else. And that's sort of the gap at the minute in terms of how do you resource that both from an individual level and
yes, they can retrain, but once they reach 19, publicly available funding, training stops. So it becomes much more difficult once somebody's finished formal education to then go around again. And I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier about being more realistic about the world of work and letting people know at an early age what it's really like. So the experience, the work experience placement is really a crucial thing to do because it can really give young people a good, interesting experience, potentially, of an area that they want to work in.
Non-formal is sort of experientially based and somehow, on purpose, it's planned, but it's not in class learning. The problem with a lot of it is the validation. They find there's no validation of it, and then there are different solutions. One of the ones I like best is because it's easiest. You just they get technical schools to validate people's qualities. So they learn them because then because the problem is with the employers, they get some kind of certificate of non-formally acquired skills or something. And the employers are like, well, what's that? It's not recognized by anyone. Non-formal learning is particularly considered important for this so-called generic skills people talk a lot about, like say with young people they're unemployable because they don't know how to interact, the interview, the sort of interactive social stuff, the time management stuff, these kinds of things, it's not just like IT, how to use Excel or something, but the interactive things, and it's very difficult to teach a lot of these things in a classroom way, like how to interact socially at work. Well, it's on the chalkboard and talk about that. So it's usually some kind of experience-based thing to get them to learn it. but then it's difficult to give people a diploma of some kind that means anything. Is there any interest in
it links to many different type of action, because it can link to, for example, our local youth job center. They get, Guillaume was telling me, they get trained to identify better the non-formal skills of the kids. They get trained, they get special training for that. We try and persuade companies that they can recruit with different methods as well. We have one that you probably have, we call it recruitment by simulating. Instead of making the young person explain what she can do and sell herself, they actually do things and evaluate people on the spot. On the spot, so that underqualified people have a chance to get
show capacity.
To show capacity.
Yeah, this is very much the validation issue.
Yeah.
But in France, this is actually rather developed. They've got the whole bilan de compétences is a big French thing. Yeah?
They also do what we call validation, VAE, validation des acquis de l'expérience, but that's more for older people. If you learn it for the non-formal.
It's the same concept but applied to different groups.
But it's not used to for young people because it's quite a heavy process, so you can use it when you're 30 or that you work for 10 years and no diploma.
Develop skills in entrepreneurship are very happy, and they get a lot of pay because they say that they are involved in a lot of skills that they didn't know, and these skills that can help you to develop the ideas, to get a job. And we are saying to pass this to the other people who left the school.
Okay, so applying it to school leavers.
We're very interested in these subjects in general. If we share the same problem of school droppers or very, very no qualified young teenagers, I think it's interesting to really think about innovative forms of training that they want to go to, that how to get them back on something.
I was in Basel, and they had an interesting thing they were doing, and it's precisely with the most disengaged young people that had the most difficulty in the educational system. And one of the things that Basel is this kind of really disadvantaged area, and what they found is that people who weren't listening to their, weren't listening to their teachers and so on, were very disengaged from them. They would listen to a tradesman differently, so they'd be saying to work with these guys, and they'd have to, if they were putting up a wall, they'd have to get the brick straight, that's geometry, they'd have to write out the bill, that's math, and that's writing, you have to write a proper sentence, and they get these sort of working guys that tell them, look boy, if you can't write out a proper invoice, you're not going to make it's not going to work out for you, and you have to get your supplies organized, it's math, your different quantities, and it would sink in. It was actually quite an effective thing. It's a small scale thing, but you really saw the difference. And it's precisely in these young people who were kind of lost. Didn't matter what the teachers told them by this point.
We use it for what we call inclusive enterprising. It's like they're funded activities. For example, you do the landscaping or you rebuild a wall, and it's not dedicated to young people, but there are a lot of 25-year-olds that left school at 15, never worked, that are there. And what we do is we have similar things so they learn their math and physics on building the wall, and after a year they get a qualification thing because they are evaluated on what they've learned on the field. And we use it to build self-esteem, and some of the kids then go back to school.
One of the big feedback points we get from businesses that when a young person starts work, they don't start with the right attitude, or they turn up late, they turn up for an interview in a football shirt rather than and it's not necessarily just about training in a qualification, it's about the softer stuff as well.
Well, that's what soft skills or generic skills, that's what I'm getting at, is because they call it generic because it's applicable for everything.
Our business is to say they want 4 things in a young person. They want good numeracy, good literacy, a great attitude, and good communication skills.
Well, it's also the argument for generic skills, which is why they call them generic skills. Like, you might not have known you'd be doing exactly this, but a person when they're 15, they don't need to know something like that anyway. That's what you're pressing. But
we have a problem because we have a very high tax of unemployment.
Great.
But when we have offers direct to young people is not registered in service of employment. In some yes, it's because they have a very strong budget with these kinds of service.
That's one of our main topic in the local group, to work on trust and The way you see work has changed, and young people don't see work the way we were happy to have a job and go on and we didn't really think about it. And now they want to have fun, they want to have a good time, and they're not prepared to keep a job that is just so.
The sort of bottom question on this is sort of what would you like to see from, what do you expect from the transnational workshop in Kaiserslautern? And I think, perhaps we've been focusing on the negatives, and perhaps what we should be saying is, in response to all the negatives we've just said, who's got some really good examples of things that they're doing that they would like to come and showcase in Kaiserslautern, things that we can work on.
So maybe what you're saying is we need best practice from a range of different types of. Because we've talked about problem kids, we've talked about high-tech training, universities, primary school stuff. So that's across the board, education and training, a good range of successful best practices. Well, I think we're saying, if in doubt, just get lots of stuff and then pick.
Even if it's quite short inputs, you can pick and choose where you want to be as you go through the day.
What I like is the idea to provide parallel sessions, and I thought now about the idea to make something, what said just before, a session from the viewpoint of the companies. That means what can companies do and how can they learn to keep their young people, and from the other point of view is how can we support the young people to stay in their apprenticeship? Yes, that everybody can decide in which session you want to go. That was one idea. The next is be something like an excursion, that you can see the dual system. That means how they enter the companies, as well as they have to go to school also. That is, I think
the service sector version of it was obviously, I think, very interesting.
It's for the handcraft at the moment.
Maybe we can find an example we could bring in for a day or something, because this issue of the service sector thing is not so well known. Dual systems for all kinds of sectors. Looking at it, how it's applied in very different types of work.
I was thinking about to send a list with all the topics that we have discussed now, and the partners should prioritize.
Good. That's good. That's a good idea. And also begin
because
to
there are
your
some partners are not here, so
I think that's okay. So we're having we'll close up with actions to be taken. She's going to send out some sort of list to get a sense of people's priorities. And you should be having another think about, within this subject area, where are your interests. She's going to speak to her people who are going to give her some input. Maybe you're going to do the same.
I can't think anymore.